Have you ever been pushed so far that you decided to teach someone a lesson they'd never forget? That was me, standing on the shore of my own lake, watching strangers laugh on a spot I'd paid and worked hard for thanks to an HOA Karen who thought the rules didn't apply to her. But when she crossed the line and gave my lakefront to her friends for free, I didn't argue. I took action. And let's just say their day of fun ended with mud, chaos, and a whole lot of regret. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. I bought that lake property 10 years ago, and from the moment I set foot on it, I knew it was more than land and water, it was freedom. After decades of working long days in construction, pouring sweat into every nail and beam, I wanted a place that belonged entirely to me. This lake, with its glassy surface and towering pines, was my reward for years of labor that left my hands rough and my back aching. I still remember that first morning I stood at the shoreline. It was late spring, and the air smelled of fresh rain and pine needles. Mist floated over the surface like a thin blanket, and the only sounds were the birds calling to one another and the soft lapping of water against the bank. I felt something stir in me that I hadn't felt in years, a kind of deep, quiet pride. This wasn't just a piece of land I bought. It was my sanctuary, my escape from the chaos of the world. I spent the first summer fixing up the place, clearing brush, building a sturdy wooden dock, and setting up a small shed for my fishing gear. Every nail I hammered, every plank I laid, reminded me that this was mine. No bosses, no deadlines, no city noise, just me, the lake, and the open sky. Sometimes I'd stay out there for hours, watching the light change from dawn to dusk. I learned every inch of the shoreline, every old tree that leaned toward the water, and every ripple where the fish liked to hide. The lake became a part of my life's rhythm. I'd bring a cooler full of beer and my old fishing rod, and sit under the big oak tree with Max, my golden retriever, resting by my side. Max loved the lake almost as much as I did. He'd splash in the shallow water, chasing sticks or barking at ducks that drifted too close to shore. My nephew would come by sometimes, and I'd teach him how to bait a hook, just like my father taught me when I was a boy, watching the kid's face light up when he caught his first fish that was worth more than any paycheck I'd ever earned. But the lake wasn't just for good times. It was where I came when life weighed heavy on me. When my father passed away, I sat on that dock until the stars came out, letting the quiet water soak up my grief. When I debated selling my construction business years ago, I found my answer while staring at the stillness of the lake at sunrise. Every memory, every decision seemed to pass through this place. It was as if the water could listen and hold my secrets. For the longest time, I had no trouble with anyone. My property was clearly marked. The access path was fenced, and I respected the HOA's boundaries on the surrounding roads and trails. They handled the nearby neighborhoods, but my lot stood apart. It was private, bought outright, fair and square, with a deed in my name. At least, that was how it was supposed to work. Then came the new board members. At first, I didn't pay them much attention. They sent their usual letters about landscaping and trash pickup, none of which applied to me. But one of them, a sharp-tongued woman everyone called Karen, started showing up uninvited. She'd comment on how nice my lakefront looked and ask why I kept it closed off. "Wouldn't it be lovely if all the neighbors could enjoy this view?" she said once, smiling, that fake sweet smile. Her tone wasn't friendly. It was the kind of tone that said she believed she had the right to take what wasn't hers. I brushed her off, telling her politely but firmly that this was private property. She didn't own it, the HOA didn't own it, and I wasn't interested in sharing it. For a while, she backed off, though I could tell she didn't like being told no. Something in her eyes told me she wasn't done. Then one Saturday evening, I drove up to the cabin for some quiet fishing. Max was in the back seat, his head hanging out the window, his tail wagging like he knew we were about to have a good night. But when I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something wrong. There was noise, loud laughter, voices shouting, and even music playing. My stomach tightened. No one was supposed to be there. I parked and followed the sound down the path toward the lake. That's when I saw them. A whole group of people, 8, maybe 10, spread out across my dock and shoreline like they owned the place. They had lawn chairs set up, coolers overflowing with drinks, and a grill smoking near the water. My dock, my chairs, my space. And there, in the middle of them, sipping from a wine glass and barking orders, was Karen. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. I could feel my blood pounding in my ears. This lake, my quiet sanctuary, had been turned into a circus. And Karen was standing right at the center of it all, smiling like a queen holding court. I clenched my jaw and took a deep breath. I didn't say anything, not yet. But as I stood there watching them stomp all over what was mine, one thing became clear. This wasn't going to end with a polite conversation. Karen didn't waste time making her presence known. From the first day I saw her at a board meeting, she acted like she was running the whole neighborhood. She was the kind of person who believed that every fence line, every mailbox, and every inch of shared space should answer to her. At first, I thought she was just another loud voice with too much free time. I had no idea she'd set her sights on my lake. It started small questions disguised as casual conversation. One morning, while I was cleaning out my tackle box on the dock, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and there she was, dressed in a crisp white blouse and holding a clipboard like she was inspecting something. "What a beautiful spot you have here," she said, with that sweet but condescending tone. "Do you ever let the neighbors use the lake? It seems like such a waste for just one person to enjoy." I gave her a polite but firm answer. "It's private property, ma'am. I bought it, I maintain it, and I keep it that way for a reason. It's my place to relax." Her smile tightened. "Oh, I understand," she said, though the look in her eyes told me she didn't. "But wouldn't it be nice to share? Imagine the kids in the neighborhood swimming here in the summer, or families having picnics by the water. We're all part of the same community. After all," I stood my ground, "it's not a public park. If someone wants a lake, they can do what I did, work hard and buy one." She didn't like that answer. I could see her jaw tighten before she forced another smile and walked off. I figured that was the end of it, but I was wrong. Within a week, I started noticing more of her so-called friendly visits. She'd stroll by when I was working on my property, asking questions about my boundaries, or hinting at how unfair it was that the HOA didn't control the lake. She even brought up the idea of organizing community events near my shoreline. Every time, I shot her down politely but firmly. One day, she took it a step further. I was hauling a new batch of firewood to my cabin when I heard shouting near the water. When I walked down, I found 2 kids splashing around at the edge of the lake, their bikes tossed on my property. A woman I didn't recognize, clearly a friend of Karen, was sitting on my dock with her feet dangling in the water. I walked over and asked, "Can I help you?" She looked at me like I was the intruder. Karen said it was fine. "She told us you don't mind." That was the moment my patience started to wear thin. I told them this was private property, and they needed to leave immediately. The woman rolled her eyes but eventually gathered the kids and left, muttering something about me being selfish. Later that day, I confronted Karen about it. "Don't send people onto my land," I said, keeping my tone as calm as I could. She laughed, like I'd just told her a joke. "Oh, come on. It's just a bit of fun. You've got so much space here, it's not like you even notice when someone takes a swim." I stepped closer. "I notice. And if it happens again, I'll call the sheriff. This isn't a playground for you or your friends." Her face turned from smug to angry in a heartbeat. "You don't have to be so dramatic. It's just water. I didn't bother arguing." I walked away, but my gut told me this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down. She was the type to push and push until she got her way or until someone pushed back harder. The very next weekend proved me right. I arrived at the lake with Max to find my gate wide open. A line of tire tracks cut through the dirt, leading straight to the dock. When I followed them, I found 3 cars parked in the clearing near my shed. And there they were again, Karen and her friends, lounging like they owned the place. This time, I didn't stay silent. I walked straight up to Karen. Get off my property. Now. She smirked, sipping from her wine glass. Oh, don't be like that. We're just enjoying the view. You're not even here most of the week, so why should this spot stay empty? Because it's mine, I shot back. You have no right to be here, and you know it. She rolled her eyes. You're being unreasonable. If you just let people enjoy the lake, you might make some friends instead of enemies. I pointed toward the road. Last warning. Pack up and leave, or I'll call the sheriff and have every one of your cars towed. The group muttered complaints, but they eventually started packing up. Karen gave me one last look, sharp as a knife, before walking away. That look told me she wasn't done, not by a long shot. I had no idea how far she was willing to go, but I could feel the storm brewing. I thought that after our last confrontation, Karen would back off. Most people, when faced with someone ready to call the sheriff, think twice before pushing further. But Karen wasn't like most people. She had that stubborn kind of pride, the kind that thrives on testing boundaries. I should have known better than to think a single warning would scare her off. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when I decided to head out to the lake for some peace and quiet. I'd been up since dawn, fixing a broken fence post on the far end of my property. By midday, I was ready for a cold beer and a lazy afternoon with Max. The sun was high, and I could already picture myself sitting under the oak tree, watching the ripples on the water while Max chased dragonflies along the shore. But as I got closer to the lake, something felt off. Even before I reached the driveway, I could hear the faint thumping of music, loud, fast, and completely out of place in my quiet sanctuary. My jaw tightened. I drove slower, and as I rounded the last bend, my stomach dropped. The clearing near my dock looked like a parking lot. At least 6 cars were crammed into the space I kept clear for my truck and trailer. Some were parked so close to my shed that I worried they'd scratch the siding. And near the water, it was chaos. There were people everywhere, 20, maybe more, laughing, drinking, and making themselves at home. Folding tables were set up with coolers and food. A couple of kids were splashing in the shallow water, kicking mud into the air, while 2 men stood on my dock holding fishing rods I didn't recognize. There was even a small inflatable raft floating near the center of the lake, with 3 teenagers sprawled out on it like they were sunbathing at a resort. I parked the truck and climbed out, my boots hitting the dirt harder than usual. Max jumped out behind me, his ears perked up as if he could sense my tension. I scanned the crowd, and sure enough, there she was, Karen sitting on one of my lawn chairs like she was queen of the whole lake. She wore oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, holding a glass of something that looked like white wine. "Karen," I said sharply, walking straight toward her. "What the hell is going on here?" She turned slowly, flashing me that fake sweet smile. "Oh, hi there. We're just having a little gathering. Isn't it a beautiful day for the lake?" A gathering, I barked. On my property, with my dock, my chairs, my damn shed being blocked by all these cars. "Did you forget the conversation we had last week?" Karen waved her hand like I was overreacting. "Oh, don't be so uptight. Nobody's hurting anything. We're just enjoying nature. You can't keep this whole place to yourself all the time. It's selfish." I felt my blood boil. Selfish. I bought this land with my own money. I maintain it. I pay taxes on it. And you think you can just invite the whole neighborhood without asking me? A few of her friends started watching, whispering behind their drinks. One man chuckled, clearly amused by the scene. "Come on, buddy," he said. "It's just a lake. Relax." I stepped closer, my voice dropping low. "You have 5 minutes to pack up and leave. Every car, every cooler, every last one of you. If you're not gone, I'm calling the sheriff, and I'll have every vehicle here towed. This is trespassing." Karen's smile vanished. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "Do you know how ridiculous you'll look, calling the cops on families just trying to enjoy the day? I don't care how it looks," I snapped. "You're on my land. Get off." For a moment, I thought she might actually stand her ground. Her jaw tightened, and I could see the defiance in her eyes. But when I pulled out my phone, ready to make the call, she let out an exasperated sigh and waved her hand at the group. "Fine. Everyone pack up. The guy wants to be alone with his precious lake." People grumbled and complained, but they started gathering their things. Kids whined. Adults muttered about how some people don't know how to share, but I didn't care. One by one, they hauled their coolers and chairs back to their cars. When Karen passed me on her way out, she stopped just long enough to glare at me. "This isn't over," she said quietly, her voice dripping with venom. "You can't keep everyone away forever. Sooner or later, you'll see things my way." I didn't respond. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching her get into her car and drive off. Max came up to my side, nudging my hand like he could tell I was on edge. After they were gone, I looked around at the mess they'd left behind, trash scattered near the dock, muddy footprints on my chairs, and the smell of smoke from their cheap charcoal grill. It felt like someone had trampled all over my peace, leaving behind nothing but disrespect. That night, as I sat on the dock watching the sun sink behind the trees, I realized something. Karen wasn't just annoying, she was testing me, and if I didn't push back harder, she'd keep doing it. I've never been the kind of man to go looking for trouble. Most problems, in my experience, can be settled with a firm word and a calm head. But after that stunt Karen pulled with her impromptu lake party, I knew I couldn't just let things slide. If I gave her an inch, she'd take the whole property and pretend it was hers. So I decided to handle it the way I knew best, straightforward and face-to-face. The very next morning, I saw her. She was out by the community garden near the entrance road, pruning flowers like she owned the entire place. I parked my truck, took a deep breath, and walked right over. She saw me coming and straightened up, brushing imaginary dirt off her spotless white shirt. "Well, if it isn't our lake guardian," she said with that fake laugh of hers. "Here to scold me again. I'm here to make things clear," I said. "Yesterday was the last time anyone trespasses on my property. No more parties. No more strangers. You tell your friends, your neighbors, whoever it is you've been inviting, that my lake is off limits." She tilted her head like she didn't quite hear me. "Oh, come on. You can't be serious. We just had a little fun, and nobody got hurt. You act like I broke into your house." I crossed my arms, my tone steady but firm. "It's the same thing. You don't have the right to set foot on my land without permission, and if it happens again, I won't be coming here to talk. I'll be calling the sheriff. That's a promise." Her smile tightened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "You don't have to threaten me. I'm just trying to bring the community together. People around here respect me because I make things better." I couldn't help but chuckle, though it wasn't out of humor. Better for who you think giving away something that isn't yours makes you a hero. You're wrong. Karen, all it makes you is a trespasser. She stared at me for a long moment, like she wasn't used to anyone telling her no. Finally, she sighed and waved me off. "Fine." Have your precious lake all to yourself. Don't expect anyone to like you when you live like this. Though, I didn't care about being liked. I cared about peace. And if keeping that peace meant being the bad guy in her eyes, so be it. I walked away, certain I'd made my point. Or so I thought. A few quiet days followed. I came to the lake after work, tossed a line into the water, and enjoyed the quiet evenings with Max at my feet. It felt good to have my space back. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done with me. The woman had a way of holding grudges, and I'd just handed her one big enough to carry for months. Sure enough, my gut proved right. A week later, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. It wasn't addressed to me personally, but the message was clear. It was a proposal to make the lake available for seasonal community events, complete with a vague suggestion that property boundaries might be reevaluated for fairness. I laughed out loud when I read it, but it wasn't a happy laugh. She was trying to use the HOA to pressure me. That's when I realized talking wasn't going to be enough. Karen was the type who only understood consequences. I didn't want to escalate things, but I was starting to think I might have no choice. The next time I saw her, it was at the mailbox cluster. I walked up just as she was collecting her mail. She glanced at me, smirked, and said, "Did you get the letter? I think it's a lovely idea. Everyone could use a little more fun." I didn't take the bait. If I see anyone on my land again without my permission, I'll treat it as trespassing, sheriff's department, towing, the works. That's my final warning." She rolled her eyes and turned away. "You're no fun. No wonder you live out there all alone." I didn't respond. I just walked back to my truck, feeling my patience wearing thin. I'd given her more warnings than she deserved, but something told me she wasn't going to stop until I made her regret it. That night, sitting on my dock with Max curled beside me, I thought about my options. I could keep calling the sheriff every time she crossed the line, or I could do something that would make her and anyone else think twice before messing with me again. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew one thing: if Karen wanted a fight, I was done playing nice. It didn't take long for Karen to cross the line again. She couldn't help herself. Someone like her thrives on pushing limits just to see if you'll snap. And after weeks of her little games, I was on the edge of snapping. It was the first Saturday of July, a day I'd planned for myself. I'd stocked up on supplies, cold beer, marinated steaks, fresh bait for an evening of fishing, and headed out to the lake early that morning. I wanted a full day of peace, away from people and their nonsense. But when I pulled up, my stomach turned. The gate to my property was wide open, not just unlatched, wide open. As I drove down the dirt road, I saw tire tracks everywhere, cutting deep into the soft ground from the week's rain. My gut clenched before I even saw the crowd. There they were again. Not just a few people this time. This was a full-on invasion. At least 20 cars lined the clearing, parked in every available spot, blocking my shed and half the road. My dock was swarming with strangers, coolers stacked high, smoke from multiple grills rising into the air. Kids were screaming and splashing in the water. There was a floating inflatable pool anchored near my fishing spot, and someone had even set up a portable speaker blasting music loud enough to echo off the hills. And who was at the center of it all? Karen, standing there with her wine glass, laughing like she owned the place. She didn't even look guilty when she saw me. In fact, she waved. "Isn't this great?" she shouted over the music. "I told everyone you wouldn't mind if we had a big 4th of July weekend here." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I parked the truck hard enough for the tires to crunch gravel, jumped out, and stormed down to the water. Max ran alongside me, barking as if he knew I was about to explode. "What the hell is this?" I shouted, my voice cutting through the music. "Didn't I tell you more than once to stay off my property?" Karen smirked, sipping her drink. "Oh, calm down. We're celebrating. It's a holiday weekend. You can't expect everyone to sit at home when there's a perfect lake right here. I don't care if it's Christmas, the 4th of July, or your birthday." I snapped. "This is my land. You don't get to invite half the neighborhood to it like it's yours." One of her friends, a guy with a baseball cap and a smug grin, piped up. "Come on, man. Don't be such a stick in the mud. It's just a lake. You're acting like it's gold or something." I turned on him. "I don't know you, and I sure as hell didn't invite you. Pack your stuff and leave. All of you. Now." Karen's smile faded. "You're being ridiculous. I'm on the HOA board, and I say we have every right to enjoy this land. It's part of the community." I laughed bitterly. "Community? You mean my private property? Show me where your name is on the deed." "Go ahead. I'll wait." She glared at me, clearly not expecting me to push back that hard. "If you want to make this ugly, go ahead. But I can promise you, you won't win. I have friends on the board, and if you're not careful, we'll vote to open this lake to everyone." I took a step closer, my voice low and sharp. "You try it. I'll take you and every last one of them to court. I'll spend every penny I've got making sure none of you come near this place again. You think I won't test me?" The group grew quiet. Karen's confident smirk wavered for the first time. But instead of backing down, she gave me a defiant stare. "Fine. Call the sheriff if you want, but I'm not moving a single car until this party is over." That was the moment I realized words wouldn't solve this. Talking to Karen was like shouting at a wall. She didn't respect anything but force, and I was done trying to be polite. I left without another word. I got in my truck, Max leaping into the passenger seat, and drove back up the road. But I wasn't heading home. I was heading to the far end of the property where the old drainage system ran beneath the dam. That lake wasn't just for fishing. It had a maintenance outlet, a simple but effective drain I'd had installed years ago for water management. With one good twist of the valve, I could lower the water level fast enough to make the dock useless. And if Karen wanted to keep throwing her parties, I'd show her what a party looked like when there was no water left to enjoy. As I stood by the old valve, hands dirty from years of use, I felt my anger settle into something sharper resolve. Karen wanted to push me. Fine. I'd push back harder. I didn't waste any time once I made up my mind. I'd had enough of Karen's arrogance, her entitled friends, and the way she acted like my hard-earned property was just another playground for the neighborhood. She thought she could walk all over me. Well, that day, I was done being walked on. The drain valve was something I hadn't touched in years, but I knew exactly how it worked. When I had the system installed, it was meant for emergencies like heavy storms when the water level got too high. It was never meant for petty revenge, but as I stood there staring at the handle, I knew this wasn't petty. This was about respect. This was about drawing a line Karen would never dare cross again. I gripped the handle with both hands and twisted it hard. At first, the old metal groaned like it didn't want to budge, but then I heard the satisfying rush of water starting to flow through the outlet pipe. The sound was like a low roar, a steady current that pulled gallons of water out of the lake and down the creek bed below. I gave it a few more turns, then stepped back, watching as the surface of the lake began to ripple, the level sinking so subtly that only I could see it. I didn't stop there. I walked back to the truck, drove around to the clearing, and parked where everyone could see me. Karen was still there, holding her glass of wine like she was queen of the world, laughing with her friends. When I stepped out, I didn't say a word. I just leaned against my truck and waited. It didn't take long. Within half an hour, the shallow parts of the lake started to expose mud patches. The kids splashing near the shore were the first to notice. Their laughter turned into squeals as they stood ankle-deep in sticky brown mud where there'd been water just moments ago. The inflatable raft that had been floating lazily on the surface began to tilt as the waterline dropped, forcing the teenagers to drag it closer to shore. "What's going on?" one of the adults shouted. I crossed my arms and smiled. "Looks like the lake's a little low today. Maybe it's time to wrap up the party." Karen's head whipped around, her sunglasses sliding down her nose as she took in the sight of her perfect lakeside scene, turning into a muddy mess. "What did you do?" she yelled, storming toward me. "Just a little maintenance," I said calmly. "Figured I'd take care of it today while I had some uninvited guests." Her face turned red. "You can't do that. This is ridiculous. People are here to enjoy themselves." I raised an eyebrow. "On my property." "You mean the property I told you to stay off? You were warned." "Karen, I'm done talking." The music cut out as someone scrambled to pack up their speaker, realizing the waterline had dropped a good foot in just an hour. Grills were being doused, chairs folded up, and coolers dragged back to the cars. The once cheerful party now looked like a scene of chaos, with people slipping in the mud and muttering about the crazy guy with the lake. Karen, of course, wasn't about to leave quietly. "You'll regret this." She spat. "The HOA will hear about this, and I'll make sure you pay for ruining everyone's day." I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. "You've been trespassing. Karen, every single time you step on my land, you're breaking the law. Do you want me to start calling the sheriff every weekend? Because I will." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time since this war started, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Hesitation. She turned on her heel, stomping back to her car while barking orders at her friends to pack up faster. Within an hour, the place was empty. The dock, once crowded with lawn chairs and coolers, stood alone over a muddy stretch where the water used to be. I walked down to the end of it, Max trotting beside me, and looked out over the lake. The waterline was down at least 2 feet now, and it would take days to recover, even if I closed the valve right then. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace, not because I drained the lake, but because I finally sent a message Karen couldn't ignore. As the sun dipped low, I sat on the edge of the dock, Max leaning against my side, and thought about what came next. Karen wasn't the kind to give up easily. She'd come back, one way or another. But now she knew I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't just some quiet guy with a lake. I was a man who'd fight for what was his. The next morning, I woke early and walked down to the lake with a cup of coffee in hand. The sight made me grin. The water had dropped even more overnight, leaving long streaks of muddy shoreline. My once clear lake now looked like a shallow puddle in places, and the dock's lower posts were sticking out, caked with muck. It wasn't pretty. But that wasn't the point. The point was that the lake was mine, and I'd just proven it. By mid-morning, I heard the sound of tires crunching on gravel. A caravan of SUVs and sedans pulled into the clearing, led by none other than Karen. She stepped out in her usual pristine outfit, a crisp blouse and spotless white sneakers, clearly expecting to host another day of fun on my land. The sight of her friends piling out with coolers and floaties made my blood simmer. Then they saw the lake. "What on earth happened here?" Karen shouted, throwing her arms wide. The others looked confused, some muttering about how gross the mud looked. A couple of kids pointed at the receding water and wrinkled their noses. I walked out from my shed, calm and collected. "Morning, Karen," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "The lake's a little low today. Guess you'll have to take your party somewhere else." She spun on me, her face flushed. "Did you do this? Did you drain your own lake just to ruin our day?" I gave her a half smile. "My lake. My choice. I told you trespassing wouldn't be tolerated. You didn't listen, so I made sure you wouldn't have anything to trespass on." Her jaw dropped. "You're insane. Do you know how ridiculous this looks? You can't just ruin something that belongs to everyone." I cut her off, my voice sharp. "Everyone, let me remind you. Karen, this lake belongs to me. It's not HOA property. It's not a community pool. And it's sure as hell not your personal party venue. I bought it. I built the dock, and I take care of it. You don't get to act like it's yours." Her friends started shuffling, clearly uncomfortable. One of them whispered, "Maybe we should just leave." But Karen wasn't about to back down. She pointed a finger at me. "This isn't over. The HOA will hear about this, and I'll make sure they take action. You can't just bully people because you have a deed." I laughed, but it wasn't out of humor. "Go ahead and call whoever you want. I've got every boundary marked, and I've already spoken to the county about my rights. You want to push me again? Next time, I'll have a deputy here writing trespassing citations for every one of your friends. See how fun that party will be." The group went silent. Karen stood there, seething, but she didn't have a comeback. One by one, her so-called supporters started packing up their coolers and folding chairs. Nobody wanted to get caught in the crossfire. By the time the last car drove off, Karen was standing alone, glaring at me like I'd committed some kind of crime. "You're a bitter old man," she spat. "You'll end up alone because of that attitude. Better alone than surrounded by people who don't respect me," I said. "Now get off my land." She stomped back to her car, slamming the door so hard it rattled. With a screech of tires, she sped off down the dirt road, throwing up dust behind her. The silence that followed was golden. I walked down to the dock, Max trailing after me, and looked out at the shallow water. It wasn't the peaceful lake I was used to, but it felt good, knowing I'd taken control. Karen had been humiliated in front of her friends, and I doubted she'd try another stunt like that anytime soon. Still, I wasn't naive. Karen was the kind of person who didn't forgive or forget. I could almost feel her scheming from down the road, trying to figure out her next move. But I was ready for whatever came next. That evening, as the sun sank low and painted the mud with streaks of orange and gold, I turned the valve to start refilling the lake. It would take time for the water to return to its usual level, but that was fine by me. Sometimes you have to drain something dry to make people appreciate its worth. The lake took nearly a week to return to normal. Each day, I went down to check the water line, watching it slowly rise, inch by inch, while Max sniffed around the damp, muddy banks. It felt good to see it returning to the calm, reflective surface I loved. The dock, stained with dried mud, looked like a veteran of a small war, but it stood strong, much like I felt after facing down Karen and her crowd. During those days, the neighborhood gossip mill worked overtime. I overheard whispers at the local store about the guy who drained his lake just to spite the HOA. Some people thought I'd gone too far. Others told me quietly that they wished they had the guts to stand up to Karen the way I did. I didn't care much what they thought, as long as everyone understood one thing: my property was not a free-for-all. Karen, surprisingly, stayed quiet. No more surprise visits, no loud parties, no strangers parked on my land. I didn't trust her sudden silence, but I welcomed it. Peace had returned, and I intended to hold on to it. A week after the big confrontation, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. I expected trouble, maybe a complaint, maybe even a threat, but what I found was almost laughable. It was a formal reminder that the HOA encourages community sharing of natural spaces, but acknowledged that my property was technically outside their direct jurisdiction. In other words, they had no legal ground to stand on. I pinned that letter to my fridge as a personal trophy. The following weekend, I sat on the dock with my fishing rod, the sun warm on my back, and Max curled up at my feet. The water was nearly back to its full level, glistening like glass. I thought about how close I'd come to losing the peace I'd worked so hard to build, all because of one entitled person who believed she had more rights than she did. But as I sat there, I realized something else. This whole mess had taught me more than just how to deal with a Karen. It reminded me why I fought so hard to get this place in the first place. It wasn't about showing off or keeping others out for the sake of it. It was about having something that was truly mine, something I earned through blood, sweat, and years of hard work. That lake was my reward, my escape, and no one was going to take that from me. I also realized that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean shouting the loudest. Sometimes it means doing something bold, something that sends a message no one can ignore. Draining the lake might have seemed extreme to some, but it worked. Karen got the point. She hadn't been back, and I doubted she ever would. A couple of days later, I ran into one of Karen's friends at the grocery store. She looked embarrassed, mumbling an apology about not realizing it was really private property. I just nodded and said, "No hard feelings, but I hope you all understand where I'm coming from now." She nodded back, and I could tell the message had sunk in. By the end of that month, life around the lake was quiet again. No more unexpected visitors, no more shouting kids or blaring music, just the soft sounds of water lapping against the dock, the wind in the trees, and Max's tail thumping against the boards as he watched the ducks float by. Looking back, I don't regret a single thing I did. Sometimes, when someone pushes you too far, you have to push back in a way they'll never forget. Karen thought she could take advantage of me, that I'd roll over just to avoid conflict. She was wrong. I wasn't about to let anyone HOA or not walk all over my hard work and my peace. As I sat on the dock that final evening of summer, I watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of red and gold. The lake mirrored the colors, calm and beautiful once again. I raised my beer and gave a small toast to the water, to Max, and to myself for holding my ground. Karen might still tell her version of the story, making me out to be the grumpy old guy who hates fun, but that didn't bother me. People can say what they want. I know the truth. The truth is, I stood up for what was mine, and in doing so, I got my peace back. As I sat there on the dock that evening, the last light of summer sinking into the horizon, I realized the fight with Karen was never just about a lake. It was about respect. It was about knowing when to stop turning the other cheek and start standing up for yourself, even if it means making tough choices. That lake wasn't just water and mud. It was a symbol of everything I had worked for in my life. Every early morning, every hard job, every scar on my hands had led to this quiet slice of freedom. Draining the lake might have seemed extreme to some, but it was the only way to make Karen understand that my boundaries weren't up for debate. And when I saw the lake, calm and beautiful again, I knew I'd done the right thing. If you've ever dealt with someone who thought they could push you around, I hope this story reminds you that your peace is worth fighting for. What about you? Have you ever had to stand your ground like this? Share your story in the comments, and if this tale made you smile or gave you courage, hit that subscribe button and join me for more stories about justice, grit, and hard-earned freedom.